this is Kevin Burke of Rachel's Vineyard. Welcome to Oceans of Mercy. Friends, the Supreme Court is poised to make an announcement on the Mississippi case that may lead to the death of the Roe v. Wade decision of 1973 that legalized abortion in the United States. In many of the protests, you will see the tired but very effective messaging of the abortion rights movement, that abortion is a private personal health care decision, a personal civil right, and a matter of personal bodily autonomy. And there can be no limitations and no infringements upon that right. Well, friends, just like the statistics of millions of back alley abortions that led to the legalization of abortion, they were created out of thin air. And that was attested to by the former abortionist and abortion activist, Dr. Bernard Nathanson. It was all grounded in lies, clever propaganda working off the very complex and challenging issues that surround the issues of human sexuality, reproduction, unplanned pregnancy. But nevertheless, they were lies. Today, we will have an opportunity to counter that false narrative with love, with charity, but with truth. The powerful truth that cries out to be heard in the life of my guest today, who is Elliott Cohn. Elliott is the president of Expectant Fathers Without Voices. He has a story of 2 forced abortions, accounts that reveal the dark reality of what choice is and what abortion rights are really all about. I will let Elliott share his story and tell you more about his organization. And I want to welcome to Oceans of Mercy our guest today, Elliott Cohn. Elliott, welcome.
Hello, happy to be here.
Great. Could you begin by giving us a little bit of your story, which is really profound and very moving and at times very dark, but also in the end redemptive. But let's start with that first abortion experience. If you could share your experience as a father and what happened with that.
Okay. The time that abortion touched my life was in 2005. I was in a committed relationship. More than a committed relationship. We were engaged to be married.
Mm-hmm.
We were not. Neither one of us were Christians. I was not a Christian yet. I've been a Christian for 14 years of my life. I'm 74 years old. So I just want to get that out there right away. We were, living together as boyfriend and girlfriend, and then we got engaged. And she suggested that, hey, you want children, I want children. Let's start a family. So we got pregnant together. It was successful. We found out that it was going to be a little girl. Everybody was extremely happy. All of our family members were happy. Our friends were happy, so on and so forth. I received a, horrible phone call one day at about 3 to 3.5 months, depending on where people want to place the timeline of when you find out, but a little over 3 months. That said that she had a miscarriage. Now this was, obviously devastating, and I went to her and said, "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. This is, it's not your fault. We can always try again later. Maybe we should just be waiting till after we're married anyways," so on and so forth. I said, but I was really, really sad about it. And so I said, I think we should maybe get some counseling, because this came as a big blow to both of us. And so she agreed. She went to one counseling session, and she got up and kind of stormed out. She said, I don't need any of this, which I, thought was strange. But at the same time, I just figured maybe it was too hard for her to, talk about it and relive it. So I continued to go to counseling, and she did not. So,
and Elliott, if I could just put it in context, you might have shared this, but I might have missed it. How old were you at the time?
Well, I was born in 1974, and this took place in 2005. So,
okay.
We can do the math on that. So
nice to get math, but You were a young man. So you mentioned
Yeah. Yes.
you mentioned that you were you had some strong feelings about the miscarriage, which I think a lot of men do. But like a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about, men don't talk about these things often. Um, and so it would be helpful to know what were you feeling about that situation, about the.
Well, just I felt grief and I felt sadness and I felt really terrible that my fiance had to go through this experience. Um, I was at work when I got the call, so I thought, oh dear Lord, she had to go through all of this, like by herself, and I just I was immediately just feeling terrible, for what she must have gone through. And then at the same time, for myself, I was obviously very, very, very sad that our little girl, who we had chosen the name for, her name is Sarah. Um, I was just very, very sad that Sarah was gone. Um, but at the same time, I was still filled with lots of optimism, and I
Sure.
thought it's okay. Look, just like I said to her, I said it's okay. Sometimes these things happen. We can, we'll get to the bottom of it, and we can always try again when the time is right. And she said okay, and that was pretty much it. But I was quite devastated, and um,
I think having named the child also, Elliot, you were very much in touch with the reality of your fatherhood. I think the naming is really powerful, isn't it? You knew the sex,
yes, yes,
you knew the gender, that it was the sex, that it was a female, it was a girl. You named her, so you were connected with the truth. And this is true whether you named the
yes,
child or whether you're aware of it. As a man, as a father, you were really in touch with that truth. And I think you also exhibit something that's also very manly, or part of our nature as men and as fathers, is you felt a sense of protection and care for her.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and so you
Yes,
wanted
yes.
her.
I felt like I needed to just come in and just make everything okay, to the best of my ability,
Right,
you
and
know?
I think that was very kind. And then she had that. So let's look at her reaction. She had a very strong reaction. What was going on with her that she reacted that way? You think?
Well, at the time, I told myself, well, that must have been a horrible traumatic experience for her. So I thought maybe her form of a coping mechanism was to just kind of uh, push it off to the side. I thought it's just something that she's not quite ready to deal with yet, and I need to just give her love and patience and time so that she could eventually feel comfortable addressing the topic again. um, Now that being said, we got back to quote unquote normal life and things were going relatively smoothly, but I was carrying around this grief. I was really sad. And she seemed to just bounce back really quickly, and like everything was fine, like it had never happened. And I found that to be a bit disturbing, but at the same time, I didn't want to pressure her about it or to judge her about her response or her coping mechanisms, or her process for this. So about 4 months after the miscarriage, I received a phone call from the young lady who had originally introduced us to one another, and she said, Elliot, I have some very difficult news for you. And she proceeded to explain to me that the miscarriage that I had been grieving was not a miscarriage, that it was, in fact, an abortion.
Wow.
And when I found that out, excuse me, when she said that, I
Yeah.
did not want to believe it. I was kind of in denial. I said, why would you say something like that? That's the most horrible thing. She would never do something like that,
Sure.
you know.
Yeah.
And I kind of, we had a little bit of a back and forth, and she says, listen, I need you to take this seriously. Okay. Sit down and just let me speak. And if you don't believe me, then that's okay. But you need to hear some things. So I said, you're being very scared and shaky, I said, apprehensive. I said, okay, well, I'm sitting down, just, spit it out.
Mhm.
And I apologize for my nervous laughter. That's a coping mechanism of mine.
Sure.
Um,
That's okay.
so I said, just spit it out already. And she says, well, those girls' nights that we've been having? Um, we go out, they would meet once a week and they would have girls' night out. And she said, well, those girls' nights, they weren't going out to a club and, having cocktails. They weren't, like us sitting around doing a book club. They were actually coven meetings. And I said, coven meetings? And she said, yes. Your ex-fiance is part of, well, excuse me, at the time she was my fiance. So she said, your fiance is part of our coven of witches. And I said, what do are you joking? Is this a joke? Because it sounded so absurd. And she said, no, Elliott, I'm not joking. I was raised in a house of faith, and I was rebelling, and I thought that, hey, I'm going to thumb my nose at my parents and so on and so forth, because in your mid-20s, people get rebellious and such. So she said, I started to do this witchcraft thing, and I didn't really think much of it. But as I got deeper and deeper into it, I knew in my heart that it was wrong, but I didn't want to admit, that I was wrong. So I stayed in it until the experience that happened when your child was aborted. And I said, okay, would you like to tell me what that was? And she said, while your child was being aborted, during that same time, the rest of the women in our coven were in a house not far away, gathered in a circle on the floor, holding hands, chanting, "We draw power from his pain." And I said, that's hideous. What is that supposed to do? And she said, well, the concept behind it is that by um, committing the child sacrifice and by getting your hopes up about a pregnancy and then ending the pregnancy, somehow in some twisted way, the witchcraft teachings said that would make them a more powerful witch to exert their power
The
over
Elliot,
life
please,
and death.
Elliot, one of the words, and please excuse me, one of the words that I was thinking right before you said twisted was twisted. I was like, boy, that is really twisted. It
I'm
really
sorry?
perverted. I was thinking as you were speaking, and you used the same word to describe this whole conversation. It was it was the word twisted or perverted.
Yes.
It was a very dark. It was. Did you have any inkling that this friend and who introduced you to your fiance at that time? Did you have any inkling that they were involved in this sort of activity?
None whatsoever.
Why
Like
do you think
none whatsoever.
why do you think she wanted why did she share that with you? Was she coming out of the coven, do you think, at that time, or was she beginning to whatever?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So I can answer that very easily. What she explained
I'm
to
gonna
me
have to ask you to
was,
watch. I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to ask you to watch our time too. We just because I want to make sure we get to that second abortion law. So I'm gonna ask you to now
yes, sir.
transition. That's okay. So you find out this news that this was some sort of satanic ritual, which must have been horribly shocking and disturbing to you. I mean, it's bad enough to experience a miscarriage of a child who you named. It's deeply painful to then find out that it's an abortion, and then to find out that it was part of some sort of dark satanic ritual. You must have been just reeling after that, Elliot.
It it was just uh, traumatizing. It was mind blowing.
Hmm.
Um, I didn't want to believe it, to be honest.
Understandable. Yeah.
And so the only reason why I even found out was because this particular young lady was raised in a house of faith, and she, after seeing me grieving and seeing her not grieving, she couldn't deny anymore how awful this was. And she went back to her church and she repented. And after she repented, she said, I have to tell Elliott about this and just blow the whistle on this, witchcraft stuff. I need to start speaking out against it. And she still speaks out against witchcraft to this day.
Thank God for that. Yeah.
Yes. So now per your request, I'm just going to speed this along. So when I gently, verbally confronted my fiance about this, when she came home later that day, I said, I got a disturbing phone call, and I told her everything that I had been told. And I said, is there any truth to that? And at first she denied it and said, no, not at all. That's, I would never do anything like that. She's lying, and so on and so forth. And she got really angry. She was throwing things around. She was acting out of character. So I just kind of took her hands and I brought her close to me. I put my forehead on her forehead and I just said, hey, honey, I just need you to tell me the truth. Just whatever it is, I'm not going to hate you, but just, I need to know what happened to our daughter. And at that point, she very loudly and proudly proclaimed that, yes, it was indeed an abortion. And she said that she was proud of it and that she would do it again. And, that really broke my heart. Obviously, started crying, asking her why, so on and so forth. And she just laughed and and made fun of me and was just exceptionally evil. And she was acting like somebody that I'd never seen.
She was really
met. So I just said,
she was mocking you, Elliott. I remember from just
yes.
reading.
Oh, she was mocking me. Yes,
Yeah.
very intensely, saying, like, I was on the floor crying, and she's saying things like, "Oh, did my poor little baby lose his baby? What kind of man are you laying on the ground crying? What kind of real man cries?" And I mean, you're not even a man. And she just was like, and I'm just looking at her saying, "Who are you?"
Yeah.
That was the main thing. I said, "Who are you? Who are you? Where is my fiance?" I almost just said her name. I don't speak her name publicly because I don't want her to have negative repercussions from anyone. And well, for obvious reasons.
Sure.
So, after she was, just really laying into me for a good long time, she just turned around and she started to walk off to her bedroom, or the bedroom, the master bedroom. And she said, under her breath, like very quietly, walking down the hallway, "I draw power from your pain." Now, here's the thing. I never mentioned to her that that's what the whistleblower had told me.
That's
so when she said that, that was confirmation for me that everything that the whistleblower had said was true.
Very good
then
point.
it really set in. And that's when I accepted the fact that this really did happen. And
because up to then, you must be thinking, this is some sort of horror movie or something, or it's almost, I can understand. You would think this is unbelievable, but you're so right, Elliott, that her response really seems to confirm that's actually what happened, and not to mention the way that she was mocking you, and which really brings to mind kind of a demonic manifestation as well. In terms of her response to you. How did you, obviously you're talking with us today and you're a man of faith, and we're going to talk later about your organization. How did you recover from such a devastating experience?
Well, my first thought was to seek counseling. So I went to a licensed clinical therapist. They referred me to a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist just wanted to put me on medication, and that didn't help. So I told him, this isn't working. No thanks. So really, my main course of coping was to become a workaholic. I didn't, delve. Some people cope by drugs and things like that, or
I think that's a common coping mechanism, I think, of men with some really painful emotional stuff. That's one area. That's an area we can focus in and feel a sense of control, don't you think?
Absolutely. Yeah. So it kind of just like for me, that it brought my world back to normal, quote unquote.
Grounded
Um,
you.
yeah. And so I just stayed busy all the time, all the time, all the time. And
But that
then,
has a price, right?
oh, yes, yes.
Mhm.
And it's not that I didn't think about it. I mean, certainly I thought about it and I was, I grieved it, but really it was just time. It just took time. At the time, I really wasn't knowledgeable about the fact that there are healing programs, for post-abortive people. I certainly wouldn't have thought that there was any for men because, men generally are excluded from that conversation. So I didn't, nobody suggested it. I didn't even think about it, didn't know they existed until many, many, many years later when I was I was on bed rest after a very invasive surgery, and during that time, I had nothing to do but think, so I couldn't be a workaholic anymore. So while I was laying there, recovering, I my mind just kept going back and back and back, to that horrible experience that I had never really dealt with. Now, by this time, I had found Christ, and so after several days of being, bombarded by images of, all these horrific things that go on during abortion, because by this time I had researched it and I knew a whole lot more about the whole process of it. And I knew more about the pro-life movement. I knew, a lot more. So I said to God one day as I was praying, I just kind of cried out and I said, Lord, why are you torturing me? Why will you why do you persist to just pound me with these images? Have I not suffered enough? And I felt a feeling of warmth come over my entire body, and a lucidity that I've never felt before. And I know now that to be that of the Holy Spirit. And what I received from the Lord through the Spirit was, Elliott, you're not being tortured, you're being called. You're being called because you have a voice, you have a strong voice. I was a professional musician my whole life before that. And so I was very used to being on stage, being the lead singer. And, so,
That's
um, but yeah, it was fun. But the Lord wanted me to use that uh, gift of being able to speak to people and not be shy and even get up on stage and talk about it. And he wanted me to use that gift to bring attention to this and bring justice to the fact that every man in our country has absolutely zero rights when it comes to abortion. Um, and with that major disparity, which was definitely the worst thing that the abortion industry, I think, has ever pulled off, is the fact of saying, hey, we're going to make it legal to um, well, to abort your baby, or to, some people say, kill your child or murder your child or whatever. I don't believe that the women are doing that. I do take issue with the doctors that perform the procedures.
sure.
I view the women as victims. I view the doctors as opportunists. But that's just my own personal view. But however, that led to me calling some people from church, and we started talking, and we formed Expectant Fathers Without Voices to try to draw attention to the fact that the man's role in the whole abortion discussion, which is mostly what you hear about in the pro-life movement, is, the guys that either were really bad guys and they, just didn't care about her. They threw some money down on the table and they, said, get an abortion, and they left her. And then and then there's even, the tremendous Silent No More campaign, where we have men that, are speaking out and saying, I regret, lost fatherhood. And, so a lot of those men that maybe did that in college or something like that, or in high school, later in life regret it. And it's amazing that they're speaking out about it. But we felt a need to put a focus on the fact that sometimes that's not the case. And actually, very often there are times where a pregnancy occurs, whether in marriage or outside of marriage, and the woman is abortion minded and the man is not. And he can't do anything to save his child and to save the woman that the mother of his child, from the pain of an abortion and the loss of an abortion and the loss of the child, because when you lose a child, you don't just lose that one child, you lose, generations to come.
That's a good point. That's a
You
really
know?
good point. I just had a grandchild that was born, and
Yes. Oh,
about 6 weeks.
congratulations.
Thank you. About 6 weeks ago, and you're right, Elliot. I often myself have to remember to think about that this is not, and not just, but this is not only the tragedy of one child loss, but generations that we just cut off that family line. That's a very, very good point. What what are your hope? Well, I'm interested in how, in starting this organization and now beginning to share this message. What is it that you hope to accomplish? What have you been able to accomplish so far? Like, what's your vision of where you want to go with that, and with
Oh,
Expected Fathers Without Voices?
so there's really three major areas. Okay. One obviously is creating awareness about this.
That's
And
huge.
and
Yeah.
by creating awareness, hopefully, most people, I believe, are essentially good people. And I think anybody who looked at a situation like the one that I just described would say, "Oh my gosh, that's horrific." And wow, I didn't think of it that way. Maybe the father should have a say in what goes on. So part of that, the first part is to reach people, educate them, and in an attempt to change hearts and minds.
Great.
The second focus is to actually work on a legislative level here in Florida, where we're based in Tampa, to hopefully introduce legislation that will allow an expectant father, if the mother's abortion minded, to petition for the right to raise his child, i.e., making it illegal for her to abort, with the understanding that the child will be taken care of by by their biological father.
Hmm.
And that's not a dig against adoption or anything like that.
No.
But if the biological father wants to raise the child and she doesn't, I believe that the father should be able to do that. Now, that being said, the beauty of it is that if she actually most abortions happen, very quickly. It's a very fear-based thing. So if she were to carry the child to term, by the time she gives birth to the child, the chances of her actually not wanting to be a mother and just throw the baby at the father and leave would be seriously decreased, because we also promote that child support should start at conception. And by child support, I don't just mean financial, I mean full support of the mother. As soon as pregnancy is known, as a man, your responsibility is to support that woman and obviously the child growing within her.
Hmm.
And if a man displays that kind of behavior, and he does what men are programmed to do, which is to protect and fulfill our God-given role, what we have seen is that, and we haven't been able to enact this, like I said, it legally yet. It's not a law, but when people contact our organization and we intervene, what we have seen is that the women that say, "Okay, fine, I'll carry the child to term, and then but you have to put on paper that I'm not responsible, like I'm not ready to be a mother."
Hmm.
And, in all of those cases, when the child was born, she was a mother, and all of the families stayed together is what I'm trying to say. The
Yeah.
families actually stayed together. That's why we have a motto, keeping families together, because that's really our main goal, is to not just save the child, but to also try to heal the broken relationship between the two individuals that conceived that child,
Yeah.
and really preserve the God-given natural family.
Well, I think that's a beautiful and important framework that you present, because one of the things that in my many years working with those who have had abortions and hearing their stories is when this whole issue of individual choice and bodily autonomy and all the language that surrounds this issue is really divorced from the lived experience of abortion, which is one that wounds people very intimately in those areas of relationship. The relationship, their intimacy, their communication, their trust, their sexual intimacy, their emotional intimacy. It really damages, regardless of the circumstances that people are facing, and they're very complex at times. But the answer, one of the things that we come to see is the answer is not abortion. And I think your framework really is part of making that experience one of healing and restoration, respecting people as well, but also respecting the rights of fathers in this situation, particularly when they're going to be in a position of being what men are called to be, which is to love their spouses or their partners or someone entrusted with life who they've impregnated, to love them as Christ loves the church. That's what I heard when you were speaking. That's the kind of love, and that's the kind of love that I think women can respond to, not patriarchal dominance love, but patriarchal love rooted in the love of Christ for his church. So what is was
Absolutely.
in our last few minutes here, Elliott, was was there anything else you wanted to share about your organization, and then we'll close up.
Well, I would just like to say that we founded in late 2019, and since we founded, we have been able to successfully preserve 7 families,
That's
meaning that the
great.
child was saved and that the parents are still together. Yes.
Praise God.
And
Congratulations.
praise God. All glory to God. All the glory goes to God. So that what we're doing works. And the other third aspect of EFWV is correcting the narratives and the things that men say when pregnancy is announced. So through correcting that narrative with the people that contact us, that's really been the most successful part. So when, for instance, when a man or a woman says, well, I'm just not sure if I'm ready to be a mother or I'm ready to be a father right now, my response is, or actually our response, the whole team is, well, you already are a mother and you already are a father.
Right.
So the question you have to ask yourself now is, do you want to be the father of a living child or a not living child? And when you put it to them that way, it really seems to wake them up. And it's such a simple thing to say. I'm shocked at how effective it is, but it really works. As far as making the choice to choose life.
Sometimes the very simple is the most profound. I found that many times. Listen, Elliott, we're going to do another record. We're going to do another show, because you have so much to share, and it's so important, and I've enjoyed so much speaking with you. We're going to do another show. I'll see if we can schedule it for next week. We'll record another show for our folks to see, and we'll focus on 2 areas at least. One of the areas will be, we're going to unpack a little more how to respond to someone who's pregnancy minded. Okay, what's for fathers, that be a message for them. And I also want you to share in our next meeting, you'll share about that second abortion, because it touches on the important issue of women who are pressured and forced themselves during their pregnancy by another person in their life to get that abortion. So, and that's also a very compelling and important account. So we'll do that in our next meeting together. If someone wants to get in touch with you, Elliott, I would imagine that you're open to speaking at pro-life banquets, at churches. either live
Yes, sir.
or via the internet like this. I imagine you're very open to sharing your story and sharing about your organization. Could you let folks know how to get in touch with you?
Well, they can contact us through the website at efwv.net. They can also find us on Facebook. Just Expectant Fathers Without Voices. It's on Facebook. There's also a private Facebook support group for Expectant Fathers Without Voices that they can join if they just want to, if they want to, chat with other men who have experienced those, similar situations. And those are really the main ways to get in touch with us. We have a Twitter account, but most people don't reach us through Twitter. Really, honestly, most comes through the website and through Facebook, to be honest.
Great. And we'll have your website will be flashed on the screen so folks will be able to see that.
Tremendous. Yeah. And they can get involved and they can learn more about what we're doing and, the importance of truly being a voice for all of the voiceless. And when I say all of the voiceless, I'm saying that to include the expectant fathers, because we really don't have any say over what goes on. We just have to beg and plead and hope that they choose life if they happen to be abortion minded.
Well,
So,
beautiful. Elliott, thank you for being that voice and being that shining the light of truth on some of these very important issues.
thank him. It's all him.
Oh, absolutely. I agree 100%. All right,
But
we're
I
going to
appreciate that.
good. It'll be great to have you back, and we'll look forward to speaking with you again. Thanks, Elliott.
Thank you.
Friends, you can see that how important it is for us to counter the lies of the abortion industry, abortion ideology. This is not a private, personal decision. There's a lot of folks involved, and particularly Elliott has shared with us the role of men, particularly those who don't have a voice in an abortion decision. So we thank him for his testimony. If you know anyone who has been hurt by abortion in any way, who has participated in an abortion in some fashion, and has been hurt by that experience, you can go to abortionforgiveness.com. You'll put your zip code in, and you'll find abortion healing resources in your community. Friends, thanks again for being with us on Oceans of Mercy.